Hello everyone, welcome to my Batman Arkham Knight, Knightmare difficulty, no damage walkthrough. This video is going to be titled Chasing the Wrong Man, because the last significant event that actually ties into the main story for this video is when we interrogate the Arkham Knight's driver, and at that point in the story, I believe it is titled Chasing the Wrong Man, and along the way, I will also be doing some of the side missions, like this one right here. So Firefly has returned in this game. The last time we saw him was back in Batman Arkham Origins, and in the game's continuity, apparently Firefly has not attacked Gotham in 8 years, which is kind of confusing because in Arkham Asylum there was a newspaper clipping that you could scan that tied into Firefly, and I believe the date on it is after Batman Arkham Origins, and some of the events that it details don't seem to happen in Arkham Origins, so I question why that was ignored in this game. That's a little odd, but regardless, Firefly is back, and the developers have ruined Firefly's awesomeness in this game. Firefly was such an amazing fight in Batman Arkham Origins, but Rocksteady decided to relegate Firefly to just being a generic chase sequence in the Batmobile. You'll already be doing this kind of chase format in the side mission involving the APC lieutenants, and so this is what you're doing for Firefly. I mean, admittedly, it's definitely a lot better than that APC side mission because the drones are not active on the map. There's no sort of tight turn that Firefly does that is bullshit. And he doesn't fire missiles at you, he uses his flamethrower in order to attack you. And so it's a lot easier to navigate the environment rather than dealing with those stupid APC lieutenants. So that's at least one thing that makes this side mission better than those stupid APC lieutenant side missions. But it still doesn't change the fact that they've ruined Firefly in this game, and he's just throwaway with the way his mission format works, where it's just a bunch of chases with him, and each time you do a chase, he has a little bit more fuel in this jetpack, so it goes on for a little bit longer in the second and third side missions involving him. And we can't even do the third side mission involving Firefly until we unlock Founders Island, because you need the Batmobile in order to activate the sprinkler system and to also chase Firefly. But currently, you can access 2 of the side missions involving Firefly, and you have to deal with him 3 times. And the whole system where Batman just grabs onto him and he just does that beatdown, why doesn't he first disable the jetpack first before he actually gets away? Because you repeat this whole beatdown process twice, and none of those times Batman has the thought of disabling his jetpack. How is that something that slipped Batman's mind, and it just makes him look like an idiot for not dealing with a simple arsonist, someone who hasn't been in Gotham for apparently 8 years, as one of the firemen says in this game. So that is definitely a massive disservice to a villain that was pretty cool in Batman Arkham Origins. And here we have Azrael. So Azrael is back in this game, as was predicted in Batman Arkham City. And it is also another side mission done very poorly in this game. So Batman is trying to test Azrael's training and his fighting capabilities and his physiology. And he gives him all these tests that are supposed to showcase if he's ready to defend Gotham, if he's actually worthy to take on the title of Batman, or not really the title of Batman, just being Gotham's savior. And the challenges that Batman sets up are not representative of what it means to actually defend the city. And all they are is just a bunch of simple combat challenges. And that's it, combat challenges. There are no Predator encounters as Azrael. So why on earth is Batman neglecting a crucial part of his crime-fighting career, which is the Predator moments, and he's not teaching it to Azrael or even trying to assess that skill? Instead, all we're doing is just combat encounters. So apparently, in Batman's mind, to be an effective crime fighter, you have to know how to mindlessly beat the hell out of a bunch of thugs, and nothing else. That's what this side mission seemingly implies. And he's not testing Azrael on any other dimensions of skill. It's just beat the hell out of a bunch of thugs, and you are worthy to actually defend Gotham. Are you serious? Do you have any idea what kind of message that sends? Do you have any idea what you're representing Batman as with this kind of side mission? You call this an effective way to fight crime? You call Batman an effective superhero in this game? It's just so stupid. It's so fucking dumb. And it's just a waste of a character. They ruined Firefly, and now they've ruined Azrael in this game. And then we don't even get to play as him in other parts of the main story. And like we get this whole moment where Azrael chooses to either kill Batman or he breaks the sword and he just goes away as an ally to Batman, but he never participates in the main story. So apparently this side mission, it's almost like Azrael is totally forgetting about what is happening in Gotham right now, and he's more keen on dealing with the Order of Saint-Dumas rather than actually helping Batman out. So what does that say? What does that say about the inefficiencies of Azrael as a character? Like, he's constantly known about this whole idea of Gotham like going up in flames, which is what's indicated with everything that's happened in Batman Arkham Knight, and he just goes away like it's nothing, like he totally forgot about it. How impactful, how suspenseful really captures Azrael's feelings towards this whole kind of event and why he feels like he needs to be Gotham's savior. He just goes away. What a joke. This is poor storytelling. This is poor character development. All of what they've set in Arkham City is meaningless with this side mission. And the only thing that matters is that we know Azrael's identity and the fact that the Order of Saint-Dumas has been brainwashing him and controlling him, and that's it. And it has nothing to do with the main story. We never get to see Azrael in the main story. Like, can you imagine if this side mission had any kind of relevance to the main story? Maybe certain events could play out differently in the main story while still getting the same kind of ending for the game. Like, that would have been interesting. And we could have had some way to incorporate side characters into the main story, but no, it's just Batman by himself. And I'm guessing that's why they set it up as such, to make it where Batman is always by himself in this main story, to show that he's the only one who can actually save Gotham and not actually rely on his allies and actually show some development. I don't know what to say, guys. This is definitely a massive disservice to these characters. They ruined Firefly, they ruined Azrael, and I mean, there's gonna be a lot more to say when they come up, because they haven't crossed my mind yet, but I'll get to them when I get the chance. But we just have to scan these symbols of the Order of Saint-Dumas through Azrael's memories, which have been tampered with, and we'll be able to designate Azrael as either an ally or a villain. And of course, with the kind of person I am, I never choose the dark side. I always choose the light side, so I'm going to redeem Azrael right over here. I mean, the Order of Saint-Dumas sounds no different to the League of Assassins with their idea of control and their perverted sense of justice. And we all saw what happened when the League of Assassins tried to kill so many people, and even innocent people, in Arkham City. And they're doing the same in Arkham Origins with Shiva trying to kidnap that innocent cop. And then now they're doing the same thing here with the Shadow of War arc for one of the expansion missions for Batman Arkham Knight. So why on earth would you ever make Azrael the villain? Makes no sense. But now we're just doing some Riddler challenges right here. So this part right here, it's a very simple puzzle. I mean, there are going to be some edits because I took a little bit longer than necessary to actually solve this. And did you see that just then? I accidentally did the EMP. It misinterpreted my button input. Like, I wanted to activate the Riddler blockade, but because I was in battle mode, it thought I wanted to do the EMP because I had charges. And so that's why I lost my charge. And that's rather annoying because if you end up doing a big combat encounter, you save up on all that energy, and then you go to do one of these challenges that involves the battle mode, and you're pressing circle to do something, and then you use the EMP, it's a waste, and you'll have to build it back up again. I mean, it's a minor issue in this case, but when you're trying to save all that energy for big combat encounters, it can be problematic. But we're just going to do that, and then we're going to go for this checkpoint right over here. So I just stumbled upon this one on accident, which is why I'm showing it right there. And I gotta say, guys, I remember reading a comment from someone on Batman Arkham Videos' channel, and they were commenting about the whole idea of these checkpoints and how the logic behind them doesn't make any sense. And it's like the militia commander says, hey, let's lock ourselves between this wall with no supplies, bathroom, and beds, and then we wait for Batman, and there's no roof whatsoever, and they're not even blocking the road. Like, the whole point of these checkpoints is to block off the roads. Like, they want to own the roads, but a lot of them aren't even on the roads. They're just to the sides. And it makes it so easy for Batman to take them out. And then they have, like, remote controls for actually opening up the walls. I mean, for some of them, though. I mean, some of them with turrets, that can make a bit of sense, but even then, if they're inside the checkpoint, the turrets, why would you not put them outside the checkpoint? That's a little confusing. And I 100% agree with those people. I do think the checkpoints don't have a lot of logic. And yes, I understand it's all in one night, but we've seen how efficient a lot of these other villains are with actually like maintaining their contingency plans for actually killing the bat. But these checkpoints don't make any sense. And I thought it was very funny, so which is why I decided to note it in this video. But we're still doing some more stuff with Riddler, and it's all pretty simple. So I'm just going to go on different tangents. And I'm going to talk about the gadgets in this game and their utility in combat, because they've made some changes, and also with the fundamental designs with the combat. So, do you remember in Batman Arkham City, where I would always jump over enemies and just do nothing but throw quick-fire batarangs? And that would actually contribute to the combo, which is great design, because the amount of times Batman does an unfavorable strike animation and I end up taking damage is way too high in these games, and to actually bypass that is great. Well, that doesn't work anymore in Batman Arkham Knight. You throw batarangs, and then you jump over someone, and then you try to throw another batarang, you're going to lose your combo. But it doesn't matter, because the game already has plenty of other diverse options for actually contributing to your combat. So you just do one action, and then you're able to repeat the stuff with the batarangs. And they've changed the way the batarangs work in the quickfire. So originally in Batman Arkham City and in Batman Arkham Origins, you had to throw 3 batarangs one at a time. Like, you had to press L2 3 times in order to throw 3 batarangs in rapid succession without killing your combo. Well, in this game, they restored the original functionality of the quick-fire batarangs from Batman Arkham Asylum. In Batman Arkham Asylum, if you had the multi-batarang ability, it was augmenting your combo batarang ability. So whenever you initiated quick-fire batarangs in the middle of combat, you would throw either 2 or 3 batarangs all the time. I mean, as long as the multi-batarangs were recharged. Well, that functionality is now restored in Batman Arkham Knight. Every time you use quickfire batarangs in combat, Batman will throw 3 at the same time, and it removes a lot of lengthy duration just throwing 3 batarangs one at a time. Because you're throwing all 3 of the batarangs at the same time, you're reducing the amount of downtime for the player, which is wonderful. And because 3 enemies can be incapacitated at the same time, it makes it a lot easier to use the multi-ground takedown on these enemies. I mean, Batman's already very powerful in combat, so there's no argument you can make against it. But I'm really glad that they restored that functionality. And with the explosive gel, they've ruined the explosive gel on this game. I mean, in the previous video, I talked a bit about the explosive gel in the Predator section, but not in combat. So on this game, rather than quickly placing explosive gel on the ground, the explosive gel has a ranged function now, so you can actually fire it as a ranged weapon against enemies. But it's not very useful, because when you hit enemies with the explosive gel, the blast radius is very, very minimal, and all it does is it blinds enemies, and they'll start swinging wildly. And you don't want to have enemies swinging wildly in a combat system that's all about the enemies following the rules of free flow, because when the enemies start swinging wildly because they can't see, they break the rules of the free flow, and they can actually hit you during animations. Now, this was heavily the case with the Titan Henchman from Batman Arkham Asylum. And so the explosive gel, you'll never see me use explosive gel in combat unless it's against the Riddler bots, because I thought that the special combo quickfire explosive gel feature, which allows you to deal like a bigger blast radius with the explosive gel, would actually incapacitate the Riddler bots, but it doesn't. And that's another thing that they've changed as well. Do you remember the ability to go into free flow focus where everything would be slowed down, and there was an upgrade that you would get in Batman Arkham City where the gadgets would be augmented by the fact that you were in the slow motion? So, for instance, in Batman Arkham City, you'd be able to throw 3 batarangs in rapid succession. Or, I'm sorry, not in rapid succession, but you throw them at the same time. The explosive gel will get a wider radius, and, you know, the same case would apply to the other gadgets. Well, they've removed the free flow focus, and instead they've tied it to the golden multiplier. So normally, the golden multiplier, which is used for doing like special combo takedowns or seek and destroy, all these other like special abilities that require the pressing of 2 face buttons, they've now integrated the golden multiplier for those special abilities with the gadgets. So using the quickfire batarang with the golden multiplier, you're able to throw an explosive batarang that knocks down enemies, but it doesn't incapacitate them, which is stupid, so the incentive to use that is very little. And the same case applies with the explosive gel. You fire explosive gel with the special combo meter, and it just delivers a wider blast radius, but it doesn't incapacitate enemies all the time, so it's pretty useless. And then we talk about the Bat Claw. So the Bat Claw is very similar to how it is in Arkham City, only they've changed up one animation involved with the Bat Claw. So previously in Batman Arkham City, if you bat-clawed an enemy and then you evaded over the enemy that you just bat-clawed, they would get knocked to the ground because, of course, they were stumbling. And because they were stumbling, if you evaded over them, they would just fall to the ground. That makes a lot of sense. Well, they've now done the same thing in Batman Arkham Knight, only Batman does a very unique animation where it's not classed as an evade animation, it's actually classed as an attack animation, where if you pull an enemy with the Bat Claw and then you try to jump over them with the same input of XX, Batman will do a unique kind of jumping over animation that is not classed as an evade animation, and I don't know why you don't get iframes during that animation, but it is one of the main reasons why I never bother using the Bat Claw in combat. Because the amount of times I accidentally evade over the enemy that I've just bat-clawed, and Batman goes into that jumping over animation, and he can actually take damage during that entire animation, which should theoretically be another evade animation, and you're not supposed to be attacked during evade animations, yet this is not the case with that animation, is really stupid. I mean, the only time you're ever safe during that animation is when an enemy is charging at you in order to grab you, and then you jump over them, because since he's doing an animation, like an actual attack animation, the other enemies can't attack. So that's perfectly fine, and that's another thing I forgot to mention as well. The enemies have some additional attack animations, so what I've just described, there's this whole ability for the enemies to rush you, and they'll try to tackle you to the ground. And the way you avoid that move is to either jump over them and knock them away, or you can do this, which is one of my favorite mechanics in this game, and it's clearly inspired by Resident Evil 4 to some extent. You can throw a Batarang during that tackle animation and instantly incapacitate the enemy. And it's beautiful design right there, because when an enemy is doing an attack animation that they don't necessarily have to do, and it only occurs under very specific circumstances, I should be rewarded for seeing that animation and punishing it accordingly. And that's why they should be instantly incapacitated. It is beautiful design right there. And I'm really glad that that is the case. But going back to the Bat Claw, the special combo Bat Claw ability, if you hold the triangle button while you're holding L2 when you have the golden multiplier, you'll go into a calm down animation where Batman will slam the enemy into the ground and instantly incapacitate that enemy. And also he'll knock back surrounding enemies, which is really cool. So that's the Bat Claw. And let's talk about the remote electric charge gadget. So the remote electric charge doesn't really have any other utilities aside from the fact that when you shoot enemies that have stun rods, you'll be able to knock them back just like you would in Batman Arkham City when you use the remote electric charge against armored enemies, because of course the metal is conducting the electricity, and I'm guessing in the case of the stun rod guys, because you're overloading the electricity of the stun rod, it's actually triggering that whole knockback effect, which is pretty cool. And another utility for the remote electric charge is when the Militia Brutes have access to shock gloves, because you can use the remote electric charge to actually disable those gloves. I personally am a little flabbergasted by the mechanic itself, because there's no reason for the Brutes to be able to counter your beatdown attempts, because they're stunned, and yet they cancel their stun animation in order to block because they have the shock gloves, and so therefore, because they have the shock gloves and the game works off a very binary system, they're just able to cancel whatever they're doing to fulfill their scripted programming of being able to block your attacks because they have the shock gloves. Same with the stun rod guys, unless you evade over them, which is stupid. And even evading over the Militia Brutes when they have the electric gloves, it doesn't work. It's so rigid in its designs, and it's all due to the paired animation system, but long story short, just use the remote electric charge on those Militia Brutes when they have their shock gloves enabled, and you will disable them, and you'll be able to do a beatdown. Simple. And then with the special combo remote electric charge, you'll be able to electrocute multiple enemies at the same time, which is good. But at the same time, not really that reliable, because they're not stunned for long enough to actually capitalize on that advantage. So what's the whole point of it? I don't really know. I mean, it's probably useful against Brutes, Like, I was able to get creative with the remote electric charge accidentally in this video because a medic is going to revive somebody in this video, and I accidentally shoot the remote electric charge into a brute, and when you shoot the remote electric charge at a brute, he'll spin around, and you'll actually damage other enemies when he does this and knock him to the ground, and he actually knocked over the medic before he had a chance to revive him, which was so cool. So that's the remote electric charge. And then we have the freeze grenades, and the freeze grenades don't really have that many benefits to them. I mean, they don't really function that differently to Batman Arkham City, although it is pretty cool that you can freeze brutes. You can freeze the brutes and make sure they're not proving to be a nuisance in the combat, so you can deal with them later and just get rid of the stragglers, which is cool. And then you have the special combo ability where you tap R2 twice, but on the second tap of R2 you have to hold it. And by doing so, you'll be able to freeze multiple enemies at the same time, which is cool. And I don't think I use the freeze grenades enough in this game. You know, I never really used the freeze grenades that much in Batman Arkham City because I oftentimes felt like they were more so a hindrance than an actual help. But I think there's some potential for the freeze grenades to actually help in combat when you can actually freeze some of the more annoying enemy types like the brutes. So, yeah, don't sleep on the freeze grenades. They can actually be pretty useful. Oh, by the way, for this particular puzzle right here, try to treat the Batmobile as if you have the level 1 ability to eject out of the Batmobile, because if you charge up your eject a little too much, you'll hit the ceiling all the time in this part, because the ceiling's pretty low. So bear that in mind when doing this puzzle, and you'll be able to get it done very well. But I've talked a lot about the gadgets that are actually useful in combat. I haven't talked a lot about the other gadgets that don't really have a combat purpose, more so a predator purpose, but I'll talk about them when I get the chance. Let's talk about the enemy types in Batman Arkham Knight, because it's easy at times to think that Batman Arkham Knight doesn't have the most diverse array of enemies. So we just have the normal thug, we have the stun rod guy, we have the shield guy, we have like the gunners. We have all these enemies that were previously in Batman Arkham City, so nothing to say there. We have the combat specialists, which are just reskins of the assassins, but they have the ability to bounce off enemies and walls now. And it can make the combat pretty awkward, because if they end up bouncing in a way that's rather awkward, they might go through you, or they might accidentally hit you, or they might miss you, and they'll mess up your combo. It's that kind of move that can be pretty obnoxious. And not much to really say there about the combat specialists, other than try to get rid of them as soon as possible, because they can make the combat pretty awkward. And then we have the medics, and the medic is a brand new enemy type for Batman Arkham Knight. Medics have the ability to revive downed enemies, and I really don't understand this whole system. And it really makes you wonder, is Batman faking a lot of his animations when it seems like he's breaking limbs and the like? Because regardless of whatever injury Batman puts upon a thug, all a medic has to do is take out a defibrillator unit and just revive the guy he's knocked out. And it's like they didn't get their legs broken, they didn't get their arms broken, so they're still able to function properly in combat, and they're able to like run and walk. I don't like that kind of ludonarrative dissonance. It makes Batman feel weak, and it's just a cheap way to actually bring enemies back. Like, I wish the medic only had the ability to revive enemies that were knocked out by normal strike animations, not takedowns, not gadgets, just normal strike animations. That would make so much more sense. But then it would probably make the programming very awkward, so I can totally understand that. But either way, the medics have this almost unnatural ability to correct bodily harm by just pulling out a defibrillator unit that will just allow them to completely ignore the rules of anatomy, and the enemy will be able to get back up without any harm whatsoever, which is just so silly thinking about it. It's almost like when Albert King or Killer Croc, like, they're able to pick up unconscious enemies and just get them back in the fight, regardless of whatever injuries Batman has done to them. And it really looks stupid. It's like fake wrestling. I mean, everyone assumes wrestling is fake, but it really feels like a very similar mentality is the case, where Batman's just faking a lot of his animations, and it seems like he's breaking limbs when he actually isn't. Because how these guys are able to revive these militia or these other enemies, I will never understand. But the medics have 3 charges, so it's not unlimited, which is good design, because if it were unlimited, the fights would go on forever, and the medics would have this very stupid advantage over you. So they have 3 charges. And they have the ability to electrocute other enemies. So they will point at an enemy, and then they'll use one of their defib units to get a militia to actually carry an electric charge, and you won't be able to attack the guy who's been electrified unless you use the back claw to absorb the electricity. And having electrified enemies on the battleground really changes the flow of the combat, so getting rid of the medic as soon as possible at the beginning of a combat encounter is important, because when Batman prioritizes the wrong guy, and that issue is still the case in Batman Arkham Knight, you want to remove that whole factor from the equation by getting rid of the medic as soon as possible. And also, with an upgrade, you can use the Disruptor to sabotage the defib unit that the medic uses to instantly incapacitate him the moment he tries to revive someone. So that's a pretty good way to start out an encounter, or even in a Predator encounter, this is also very useful. And the Disruptor has definitely gotten a lot of upgrades, but I'll talk about it when I get the chance. So that's all you really need to note about the medic. And then we have the brutes. There are two variants of the brutes. One is just the normal thug brute, which is one that can just go down very quickly from a takedown or from a beatdown animation. But they have a really fast strike animation that requires you to counter it or just stop it entirely. I mean, you're not really countering them, it's just you're more so stopping the attack. And then from there, you just evade to another guy, or you just initiate another attack. And sometimes your combo just disappears for no reason when you decide to counter the brutes like that. And I don't know why this is a problem, but it's still an issue in Batman Arkham Knight. It's very confusing. But the brutes, they can go down from takedowns, you can use beatdown animations, you can also use environmental attacks on them, which is incredibly overpowered in actually getting rid of brutes. Because you can lure them over to generators, you can lure them to lights, you can lure them to anything that has an environmental takedown option available. Regardless of what combo, regardless of whatever health they have, you will instantly put them into that animation and instantly incapacitate them. It is so powerful, and it can definitely help in balancing out the encounters to get rid of those really annoying enemies. But you have the Militia Brutes as well, and the Militia Brutes are pretty similar to the normal Brutes, given that they have the same exact fast jab. But aside from that, they have more health than the normal Brutes. It takes about 2 takedowns to fully take down a Brute, or you can just do one massive beatdown on them. And also, with the Militia Brutes, they have the ability to use weapons, and the weapons are directly mounted to their suits. They come out of their arms, and they can swap between these weapons at will. So they can use either shields, shock gloves, or blades. With the blades, you can just do the blade dodge takedown. You'll have to do it twice on the Militia Brutes. And then with the gloves, you just use the remote electric charge to disable the gloves temporarily. And then with the shields, you just do the aerial attack to stun them. Basic stuff right there. And then you can just initiate the beatdown from there. It all sounds very simple, but I still recommend you get rid of the brutes as soon as possible, because they can affect the flow of the combat negatively when they're interfering in your ability to actually handle the other enemies. It's just the other stragglers. So yeah, cashing in on those takedowns is what I always do when taking care of brutes. The moment I get a takedown, I just immediately try to use it against the brute, or I try to go for an environmental takedown. And I think that's really all of the enemy types that come to mind, and then the rest of the other enemy types are just drones, and you've already seen all variants of the drone, aside from the missile launcher drone, and that one I'll talk about when we get to Founders Island, but it's a damage spongy drone. However, you can get rid of each of its individual weapons, and it's really cool that it lets you do that. You shoot the missile launchers on either side of that drone with one shot from the 60mm cannon, and they're gone. And then all you have to worry about is just the missile lock function that's very similar to the Mamba drone, and you just shoot the missiles out of the air with the Vulcan gun. So yeah, that's really all of the enemy types worth noting for Batman Arkham Knight. Oh wait, I totally forgot about the Riddler bots though. The Riddler bots, like I mentioned, are just very similar to the normal henchmen. They don't get knocked down so easily, and they will get knocked over by quick batarangs, quick explosive gel, or the back claw. Not the back claw slam though. The Backclaw Slam, they just immediately reassemble the moment they recover from the animation, much like what Deathstroke does in his boss fight on Arkham Origins. And there are also the blue and red variants. The blue variants, Batman's only able to damage them, and then with the red variants, Catwoman's the only one that can damage them. And there is this habit for the characters to prioritize the wrong robot, and if they prioritize the wrong robot, they'll take damage from an electric shock. I showcased this a couple of times in part 3 of my annoying/dumb/weird moments video series for the Batman Arkham series. But that's really all the enemy types you need to worry about for Batman Arkham Knight. Seems like a diverse amount, but it's very easy to forget about certain enemies. Oh wait, I totally forgot about one enemy type. This enemy type is only introduced in one encounter in the main story, and it's the enemy that has the Optic Deflection armor. So there is a Militia variant that has the ability to be invisible to your detective mode. So you will never be able to see them through walls. They will not have any skeletons that indicate where they are. They are completely immune to the detective vision unless you disrupt their Optic Deflection armor with the Disruptor. But you need an upgrade in order to do that. And you'd think you'd be encountering more enemies like that in the earlier Predator encounters on New Game Plus, but you really don't. Oh, yeah, I forgot about another enemy type. There's the minigunner. Yeah, I'm just forgetting about all these obscure enemy types that you only see in very specific encounters. But the minigunner, you only ever deal with the minigunner when he's off by himself or when he's the last enemy, because all you have to do is just do a beatdown on him and just counter each of his individual strikes, and he goes down very quickly. And you can also use environmental objects against him, like, for instance, the generator with the remote hacking device. And you can also use other gadgets as well. So, yeah, not the most interesting enemy type, but it's still a different enemy type either way. And, yeah, that's all of the enemy types you have to worry about. And I mean it that time. I'm not going to just suddenly think of another enemy type out of the blue. That's all of the enemy types you have to worry about for this game. So, I guess in actuality, the game does have a diverse arrangement of enemies, but you really don't notice it a lot for, like, 95% of the combat encounters in the main story, or even in the side missions as well, because they reserve a lot of these enemy types for very specific encounters. And like I said before, with the Optic Deflection armor Militia, you only ever see it during one big encounter, and that's during the boss fight against the Arkham Knight. And I can't really recall any other moment where you fight Optic Deflection armor enemies, because they're only reserved for the Predator encounters. And I don't think this game has that many Predator encounters, aside from the side missions alongside the main story. But I just did some drone combat. I took down a bomb, and then I also dealt with some other drones. If you remember in the previous video, I said I was going to experiment a lot more with the EMP on the Batmobile. And it turns out that the EMP is incredibly powerful, but it's only powerful if you have a lot of secondary weapon energy stored in your Batmobile. Because if you just use one secondary weapon charge, the EMP is very useless. But when you have a lot of charges, the EMP has massive range and it incapacitates the enemies for a very long time. So yeah, try to make sure that you're saving up on your special weapon energy in order to use the EMP, because it can really change the flow of battle in your favor. It's so powerful. I had no idea it was that powerful. I don't know why I just thought it was useless, because it really isn't. But we have a combat encounter right here. So I always started off with using an environmental takedown on the first brute. And here's another brute. Did you see that just then? I fired my remote electric charge accidentally at the brute, and he knocked over the medic, so I was able to finish him off with the multi-ground takedown. So that was really cool. And you'll notice right here I'm using the bots. This is a mechanic that I totally neglected to mention. But Batman now has the ability to pick up enemy weapons and use them for himself. So this only applies to bats and clubs, and also to throwable weapons. So you know those moments where enemies pick up boxes and chairs and they just throw them at you? Well, 2 can play at that game, because you can actually pick those up and throw them at enemies. And it really feels like you're letting out a lot of anger at the amount of times you've been hit by those projectile weapons. And so the fact that you get to use those projectiles against enemies is so satisfying. But there's only those 3 weapon types that you're able to use as Batman. He can't use stun rods for whatever reason, yet he does takedown animations where he shocks enemies with the stun rod to the point of unconsciousness. So if he's able to incapacitate enemies without killing them with the stun rod, why is he not able to use them in combat? And I think it would be a very interesting weapon to use. If you could use stun rods in combat, imagine being able to instantly incapacitate enemies that are nuisances. And you didn't have to waste time building up a takedown animation. You could just use that weapon in order to floor enemies to the ground for a long duration, or just instantly incapacitate them. And it could really add some special effects to the combat. So I'm a little disappointed that you can't use the stun rods against enemies. And also, I'm surprised that Batman doesn't use guns as well. Like, he doesn't remove the magazine entirely from a gun and just use it as a club. I mean, like, in Condemned, for instance, you could use weapons as clubs. Like, if you had a gun and it ran out of ammo in Condemned, you could use it as a melee weapon. So why can't Batman use it here? That's a little odd. I mean, he literally does a takedown animation on an enemy where he grabs the gun and he butts them in the head with the weapon. So, yeah, no excuses. Let us just use that gun, that empty gun, and just bash enemies with it. That'd be cool. But we're now doing this, and yeah, it's more of these stupid chases in the Batmobile. And you're gonna see just how sporadic the detection is on this immobilizer. So if the enemies get to the sides of your camera view, you're gonna lose that detection. But even when they're not in the side of your camera view, the detection just fails a lot of the times. And it's just, you have to hit these enemies at least 2 or 3 times with your immobilizer in order to incapacitate them. And it's a waiting game right here. And it's even more of a waiting game when you're using no damage as well, when you're factoring that as a restriction. Because I'm having to take this nice and slowly. And you'll notice right here, these guys aren't gaining as much of a speed boost because the APC that's right in front of these smaller vehicles is blocking their paths, which is why they're moving very slowly. So that's why I'm able to catch up with them a little bit more. But you see that just then. You know, I shoot them once with that immobilizer. They should be slowed down. Their movement should be slowed down. Like, why can't the immobilizer be used to take out the rear tires so that you can then slow them down? Or, I don't know, like, what if there is directionality factored in with the immobilizer? What if you use the immobilizer from a certain direction and it generated a specific kind of impact on the vehicle? What if you used it on the left and so therefore it affected their steering ability? What if you used it on the right and it did something else? What if you used it on the back and it took out their back wheels? And then they would fishtail a lot or oversteer or just have their movement slowed. Like, there's so much more they could have done to make this mechanic so much better, but they just settled with a half-assed, crappy immobilizer system that requires multiple uses to take down these vehicles, and it's just a waste of time. And I only need one more hit from the immobilizer to take this guy down, but just look at this. Look at me doing all these weird collisions with geometry and just watching the Batmobile just get flopped all over the place. It just looks so goofy. It's really goofy. And these chases just don't do this game any justice at all. And now we're going to interrogate this guy, and apparently this was one of the scenes in this game that gave this game a mature rating, because every single Batman game except for this one is rated T. So it seems like this, and also with Professor Pig and also the Shadow of War arc, that just gave this game a mature rating. I mean, with this scene in particular, I don't see how this is a mature scene. I mean, it doesn't even look that well choreographed. And like when the wheel on the Batmobile is going through this guy's head and it doesn't even look like it's crushing him, and like there's no like bloodshot eyes or anything. I don't see how this is mature. And like Batman's already choking guys when he's interrogating them, like he's holding them by the throat. And this is a very similar situation, but Batman's held enemies by the throat in the previous games and it was still rated T for team. It doesn't favor any blood whatsoever, so why would this scene be one of the scenes that gave this game a mature rating? I don't understand that. It feels rather like teenish, if you ask me. And I would say the same case applies with Professor Pig as well, because it's really censored with what he's actually doing to that victim on the table. It doesn't feel so mature, if you ask me. So, yeah, I don't really agree with the mature rating of this game. This game is pretty light on the violence, if you ask me. Aside from the Shadow of War arc, of course, because, I mean, you're seeing assassins impaled on the walls, and there's a lot of dead bodies and a lot of blood. I mean, you saw a lot of dead bodies as well in Batman Arkham City, and yet that game gets a rated T. So why does this game get a rated M, aside from those scenes with the assassins in the Shadow of War arc? That's the only scene that I feel demands a mature rating. The rest of this game feels like it's a rated T game. So, yeah, that's what I feel about that. But we just have one final encounter with the drones in this video. This is when you get outfitted with a new device from the Batwing. And I try to run away from this encounter and actually get to a strategic position. But I got hit so many times by these enemies because when you're in chase mode, you can't see the path that the enemy rounds are taking. So you'll get hit by nothing when it turns out they are shooting at you. You just cannot see the paths that they're shooting at. So that's what was causing me a lot of trouble. And then also, the way the enemies spawn in during these sequences is dumb because they spawn into the map. You don't see them coming out from some specific spot. They spawn into the map, off camera. they literally just get placed into the map when they're off camera. So they can be placed around corners, they can be placed right behind you. You just see them appear on the map out of nowhere, and it's just one of the dumbest ways to spawn in enemies. And it's just so artificial in its designs that it just leads to a lot of cheap moments where they get an advantage over you. And I really wish they refined the spawns a lot better during these sequences, where they actually didn't spawn into the map like an AI system, but they actually had a realistic way in which they spawned in, so that it didn't feel so cheap. And yeah, that's really all I have to say about that. But that is the end of this video. Stay tuned for the future parts. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.